What's going on, guys? Chris Warner here with Overtime Athletes, and for today's video, what I want to get into is discussing the 3 pillars of speed development. As you know, my newest program, Athletic Speed System, is launched, and what I want to do to be able to give value and give back to you guys is essentially go over what the parameters of that program is and what I focus on with an athlete in off season, whether it be baseball, basketball, football, rugby, soccer. There's a few things that I focus on in the off season to get the most bang for your buck and ultimately reduce that time on that stopwatch, and that will translate over to their sport. So going through these 3 pillars, number 1, we have relative force production. Number 2, we have acceleration mechanics. And number 3, we have top speed mechanics. Let's get into number 1, relative force production. Now, when it comes to the first pillar of speed development, it's understanding relative force production. Every time we make contact with the ground, we want to not only have minimal ground contact time, but we want to be able to produce as much force as we possibly can. Now, in order to build relative force, what we need to do is understand what relative force is. Now, there's 2 types of strength. There's absolute strength and there's relative strength. Relative is just how it sounds, relative to your body weight, where absolute is the total amount of resistance that you can overcome. Now, what I like athletes to imagine is, imagine you have 2 athletes that are 200 pounds in body weight. One can lift 300 pounds, one can lift 500 pounds. The one that lifts the 500 pounds obviously not only has better absolute strength, but he also has better relative strength. If you think of it like this, if there's 2 athletes, one 200 pounds, one 300 pounds, and they both lift 400 pounds, the one that's 200 pounds has better relative strength. So you just need to think of it as the athlete that has more strength relative to their body weight. So absolute strength divided by their body weight. Now that we have that understood, how do we build that relative force production? Well, obviously, going back to the absolute strength, you need to have a good foundation of absolute strength. If I have a young athlete who's in high school or even younger, and they don't have that solid foundation, what we need to do is we need to elevate their overall absolute strength. Now, to build absolute strength, I'll go over a couple common things that you'll see inside my program. Now, there's 3 lifts that I typically focus on in this particular order. When it comes to speed and developing that posterior chain strength with the lower back, the glutes, the hamstrings, number 1 that I like to focus on is trap bar deadlift. Why? Because I can really build a solid base of absolute strength that will translate over, and from what I see from my experience, translates over to speed in particular. Number 2 would be the back squat. And I'll get into how I go ahead and develop the back squat utilizing triphasic in the next section. But I really utilize back squat. And number 3 will be the reverse lunge. Due to the fact that I love the angle and the range of motion that it places the unilateral leg or the single leg through. Now, after focusing on these 3 lifts over the course of an off season, there's basically a simple progressive overload that you can use. Now, if you're an athlete that works with me inside the gym, these things and these parameters might change, but just for purposes of giving you guys a simple one, we'll go over a 4-week block. Week 1, you can perform anywhere from 5 sets to 4 or 5 reps. Week 2, we knock it down to 5 sets for 3 repetitions. Week 3, building up, basically going 5 sets of 2 repetitions, with the last one being what I call a technical 2. It's not necessarily a 1 rep max. What it is a technical 2 means I want you to be able to achieve 1 to 2 reps with perfect form, not sacrificing any of that technique. And then week 4, we go ahead and deload, where we cut that into 50%, and we essentially are able to rest the nervous system. Now, if you're able to follow this with one of these 3 exercises, what you'll notice is as we decrease the amount of work or the amount of repetitions, our goal is to increase the intensity. Now, if you were just to approach this from an intuitive sense, what you'll want to do is you'll want to essentially be able to gain anywhere from that 5 to 15%, especially athletes new who are detrained or just coming off an off season or just coming into an off season. You'll see that strength be able to accelerate a lot faster than an athlete who's been training for quite amount of time. So if you're able to utilize these 3 lifts, which will essentially build that lower body strength, while using this simple progressive overload, you can begin to build your absolute strength pretty efficiently to be able to transfer over to make you faster as far as on the court, field, or track. Once I know I've established that, what I want to do is I want to be able to transfer a lot of that absolute strength. So simultaneously, I'm actually building their elastic strength as well. Now, to build that elastic strength, we're going to focus on 2 areas or 2 modalities. One will be your plyometrics or your jump training, and number 2 will be triphasic training. That's really the kind of the secret sauce, the tempos that I use to be able to develop that, and we'll get into that. But as far as plyometrics go, we want to essentially be able to transfer over what we've developed as far as absolute strength, move down that speed strength continuum, and start to be able to utilize more jump training. Really here, what I do is I break it down to a simple progression of landing mechanics, teaching the body to absorb force, generate energy. Then I'll transition that to more transition, basically ground contact, which is kind of rebounding off the ground. And then finally, in the last phase, or when I'm trying to peak an athlete, I'm focused on the total amount of force that they can produce. Now, when it comes to triphasic, obviously these 2 are going to support each other. Triphasic is going to support your ability to jump. And what I do is we follow a progression of eccentric, isometric, concentric. Now, for instance, one exercise that I absolutely love to do when it comes to triphasic training is the back squat. And during that time, what I'll do is I'll actually perform 1 block of eccentric training, which would be basically the down phase. So slowing down that tempo and the benefits associated with it, which are essentially the stretch reflex and the stretch shortening cycle. The isometric phase, where we're maximally recruiting motor units, and then the concentric phase, we're essentially working that rate of force development. By blocking all 3 of these and then peaking at the end with a form of contrast, we can really enhance the plyometrics, which will overall enhance the elastic strength and our ability to propel ourselves down the field or track. So that's it for relative force production. Utilize those methods to be able to build those up and develop your speed. Now, if you're interested in a full, complete program going over and utilizing these 3 pillars of speed development, go ahead and check out the link down below for my newest program, Athletic Speed System. See you guys later.